the micro product isn't just another category that you fit into a tab that has 50 or 60 markets and then people have to navigate to it. The integration itself and how people are being presented or merchandise that product is extremely important. And there's a big, big difference. And we see that as well because we power over 100 books globally, that books that simply put us in a category don't get as much of their share of handle during in play from the micro product than the ones that are presenting it in the right way, that are using some of our recommendation-based algorithms that kind of pick out the best bet right now.
This podcast is sponsored by Pragmatic Solutions, the player account management platform chosen by today's smart betting and gaming operators. Don't let technical constraints delay you from achieving your business goals. Expand your business, boost your margins, and dominate the market in any leading regulated jurisdiction with our powerful, flexible, and secure iGaming platform. Enjoy its extensive marketing tools, compliance protection, real-time data, and a wide portfolio of over 1,000 industry providers. It's time to upgrade your technology. Let Pragmatic Solutions show you the modern approach. Visit pragmatic.solutions and join the smart thinkers.
This podcast is brought to you by Pragmatic Play, a leading game developer providing player favorites to the most successful brands across the industry. With an award-winning multi-product portfolio of slots, live casino, bingo, virtual sports, and more, Pragmatic Play is powering up new possibilities of play through one single API. Visit pragmaticplay.com and discover your favorite every time.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Vested Interest podcast. Here, like always, with the eminent Benjie Cherniak and Lloyd Danzig. Today, we have a very special show planned for our listeners, as we are joined by the microbetting gurus Joey Levy, founder of Simplebet, that just exited to DraftKings in a deal worth nearly $200 million, as well as Tomash Devenishek, founder of the competitor to Simplebet, Kero Sports. As you can probably tell, today's episode is a microbetting extravaganza. And before we bring the guests on, seeing that my dear co-hosts here today have been part of the Cura Sports and Simplebet journey as advisors and investors, I thought it would be great to set the tone by getting to know the organizations a little bit better. So, Benjie, just starting off on your side, can you perhaps give us an introduction to the microbetting as a product, and perhaps give us a quick introduction to the lay of the land in the world of microbetting?
Yeah, look, the lay of the land dates back really to the advent of in-play wagering and the growth of in-play wagering, both globally and within the US space in particular. And as we all know, in-play wagering, or live betting as referred to, is betting during the game as opposed to before the game starts. And you have all types of markets that you can bet on during the game. And once you got with the repeal of PASPA and the advent of sports betting within the US, there's a notion that some of these American sports are really well suited to in-play betting, but not just in-play betting, but what will happen in a given moment during the game. And I think that's where, Joey Levy's initial thought process of microbetting markets came into fruition. The idea of betting on what will happen on the next at bat, what will happen on the next pitch, what will happen on this next drive in football, and being able to within that framework make bets on components and moments within the game itself is kind of the thought process behind micro betting. And of course, it's grown significantly from its early days and iterates in a bunch of different directions, but that's the general thought process.
Lloyd, obviously, after a lot of speculation, it was finally announced that DraftKings is indeed looking to acquire Simplebet in this nearly $200 million deal. Lloyd, why is DraftKings looking to acquire Simplebet?
DraftKings has a history of M&A focused on both vertical integration and what might be called defensive deal making, preventing competitors from having access to a proprietary service. And this seems to fit, both of those. They acquired Sports IQ not too long prior for a smaller sum. Was also a pricing, although not micro betting focused service, and dates back to their IPO where they vertically integrated SB Tech as part of their SPAC merger. And I think, most companies that grow and attempt to be market leaders in an industry seek vertical integration, optimizes unit economics, and again, tends to deprive competitors of a service. like micro betting, where there aren't a ton of providers. Most operators cannot do it in-house, and it does seem that the younger generation really likes these more recreational types of bets, whether they're same game parlays or micro bets or otherwise. So I think a very astute but not unexpected move from DraftKings gives them more control over their tech stack, makes it a little bit harder for some of the other desired micro betting entrants to launch products as quickly.
I would kind of add to that, Lloyd. I don't know if I would contradict, but I would certainly add to it that I have to think that a significant motivating factor as it pertains to this particular transaction was really just dollars and cents and basic math and the economic factor. And there's, it was clear that they were by far Simplebet's biggest customer, and the lion's share of the revenue that Simplebet was achieving was from DraftKings, from what I understand. And, it's a scenario where if you're spending X dollars annually to a supplier for a service, and within that, there's an ability to acquire that asset for some multiple of X dollars. I'm sure they ran those formulas backwards and forwards and utilized whatever leverage they could within the negotiations of acquiring that asset to maximize the benefit economically. We're putting aside taking away this product from the competition. And I don't know definitively that they will take it away from every competitor. I'm not really sure how that's going to shake out. But I think that a primary motivator here was, of course, owning the asset, being able to do what you want with it and use it on a proprietary basis in-house, but also just pure dollars and cents.
Yeah, and I would say another part of that same equation is, okay, we're spending X dollars on a particular supplier. How much would it cost us and how long would it take us to rebuild this technology ourselves? And in the cases where that answer is less than what you are spending and less than what it would cost to acquire, especially when you factor in opportunity cost and time value of money, sometimes that's how you make a build versus buy decision. And I think clearly, to Benjie's point, not only did they do the cost benefit analysis he described, they probably thought about realistically how long would it take us if we wanted to build and replicate this in-house. And I don't doubt that the upfront cost, certainly of this transaction, especially when you then factor in how long it would take to not only hire a team of engineers and pay them that much, but allow them to build the product. It probably is the cheapest, most economical and efficient route for DraftKings to own in-house micro betting and related services. And maybe, we'll talk later here, I'm not sure, but Simplebet has started to foray, into areas outside of just providing micro betting feeds. And certainly some of those areas of the business are a bit less developed, but you can look at press releases about them signing on as I forgot the terminology, I think the official innovation partner of Live Golf, for example, which is a deal that actually has very little to do with micro betting. That is one component, but there are many others. And so, I, again, without having access to any specific information, just as Sport Radar and Genius are trying in some ways to get into Simplebet's business, I would expect Simplebet to, perhaps have the ability to expand some tentacles into other areas of the Sport Radar and Genius Sports business, whether that is data collection, data enhancement, data visualization, things in and around the pricing and infrastructure that all, again, to Benjie's point, are quite valuable to have in-house if you're DraftKings.
So presumably DraftKings will be looking to ring fence this product, right? Other operators would presumably not be able to access Simplebet after this acquisition is done. And Lloyd, how would this impact DraftKings competitors, or for that matter, Simplebet's competitors? We have obviously Cura Sports founder here on in a little bit.
Yeah, great for Simplebet's competitors, obviously. I'm sure Tomash will tell you he was probably in some ways the first person who knew how serious the Simplebet deal was, because he started getting calls, from some of their clients who are not DraftKings, who obviously wanted to figure out what the solution was going to be on a go-forward basis. I think that it puts pretty much the exact type of pressure on certain competitors as you would expect. Perhaps some of the larger folks, perhaps the FanDuels and the Bet365s of this world do and will have the ability to do any form of pricing they want in-house. And so perhaps, this deal is not particularly consequential for someone like that. But anyone who has a tier 2 or below micro betting offering, a non-existent micro betting offering, anyone who is looking for a turnkey out of the box solution, in particular, many of the international stakeholders who were very dismissive of micro betting when Simplebet was originally founded, and now are scrambling to find providers. Again, they maybe not DraftKings direct competitors per se, but other operators who now realize there's one less turnkey solution, certainly also, I think, have a bit of a fire lit under them. So should be an exciting time for anyone with enterprise quality pricing capabilities, not just micro betting, player props, same game parlays, and other types of pricing and risk trading instruments as well.
And Benjie, I mean, presumably the evaluation for Kero Sports must be impacted as well because of this acquisition, right? I mean, it's a $190 million price tag on Simplebet, an operator who's willing to pay that amount of money. That must mean something for Kero Sports' ability to raise capital if needs be in the future. As an advisor and an investor to the business, how do you think about that opportunity?
To be honest, I haven't really thought about it from that perspective or that lens, now that you bring it up. Look, the Simplebet transaction here is a bit of a double-edged sword, not from a Kero perspective, from a Simplebet perspective. You've got some early investors in the business who did well with this transaction, but they raised a lot of capital, and they did some raises at higher valuations, and in some cases superseded the 195 million number. And of course, those were preferred shares for those investors, but it's not like a scenario where it was, even though it's a big price tag, it's not a scenario where everyone hits a home run here. And even for the founding team, they've got common shares and they're in many instances in line behind some of the other investors. So, sometimes you can have a deal where a company is sold for 30 million and people are making more money than a deal that's sold for 195 million, depending on how much of the earnout is actually achieved, depending on how much of it is cash versus stock and the value of that stock. So I think there's still a lot of unknowns, and I think we have to be a little bit careful saying this was a grand transaction that's massive for the industry because it's a total value of potentially up to 195 million. There's a lot of nuances and complexities within that, but certainly if you're Kero or any of the other competitors within the micro betting space, it gives you some sort of a North Star as to what another competitor within the industry has achieved. And bear in mind that was achieved primarily with a US focused product, not an international product. So those that have a more international approach, in theory, maybe have an opportunity to enhance that TAM in some capacity.
Brilliant. Final question here before we bring the founders on. Lloyd, from what I hear, from what I gather, there were a lot of naysayers in the beginning as Joey ventured into this idea to start the Simplebet journey. What did everyone get wrong when passing on the Simplebet's seed round?
It's funny. I don't know if it was as much, like the investors always pass on deals. Frankly, we had great participation in the early rounds from very high quality investors. It was really, I'd say, the commercial partners, the sports books that were the most dismissive initially. And to Benjie's point about, how sometimes people like to share these headlines of these romantic stories, you could tell a story. You could say, look, Joey previously had founded DraftPot, another fantasy company. He got the Teal Fellowship. He brought on Mark Nerenberg, who had founded Draft Street. It was this young group of kids that hired the best data scientists in the world who had spent more time building and playing fantasy sports and sports betting in the US than anyone who was working at the larger competitors. They had all of these great investors. Everyone agrees that instant gratification is the wave of the future. And so how could any sportsbook not, jump at the opportunity to integrate or invest in someone like Simplebet? But that is not at all, how things were. Most people wouldn't take calls or meetings initially. Those that did, and especially keep in mind, in 2018, there were a bunch of Americans excited about PASPA. And there were a lot of Europeans and Australians who said, oh, look at you adorable little Americans who have never had a regulated sports betting market before and have these cute little ideas, but you have no idea that most of them will not pan out. And here's all of our expertise that confirms that. And I think those folks who, for the most part, were the either executives or advisors at all of the global sports books that Simplebet had approached, they said no one wants to do micro betting. No one wants to be staring at their screen. No one can possibly follow a bet that has such a short duration of time. And it took, my God, these days in the pricing world, all everyone wants is an odds feed. And it's pretty obvious that that's your main product, is the XML or JSON file that you send out that has, let's say, the odds for micro betting. But when micro betting wasn't even a term yet, no one had any interest in this weird feed. what Simplebet ended up having to do, you might recall, there was briefly a FanDuel free-to-play product called like FanDuel Play Action or something like that. Benjie, I don't know if you remember what the name was. And that was really the first deal Simplebet ever did, which was requiring them to wrap this incredible AI engine in, frankly, like a very simplified, reductive, but easy to understand user interface for a FanDuel standalone free-to-play product that let people make free in-game predictions. That was not even on the original roadmap. It was only because so many people truly just laughed in the faces, were dismissive of, didn't take calls with, said with all the confidence in the world that no one will ever engage with micro betting, that they had to take, not only a roller coaster of emotions, but this really circuitous route to getting FanDuel to agree to this, only moderately successful free-to-play in-game product, but that ended up really being the vehicle to put in the minds of other folks in the US. What is this thing called micro betting? What is the experience actually when we talk about betting on short duration moments within a particular game? And I think both of those factors that I'm describing here, to Benjie's point, are a good example of, first of all, why no matter what story anyone tells after a company is successful, it almost certainly was not smooth sailing originally. I think it's a good example of how, naysayers to some extent are a positive indicator. The fact that so many people thought it was impossible or not necessary is why there was such a big root. And then finally, just the idea of, really having to iterate and find some degree of product market fit. I don't think, and we can ask Joey later, I don't think they ever really planned on, doing a white label free-to-play game for FanDuel. But after knocking on so many doors, they realized, look, we got to do some UI UX work to really just shove into the minds of commercial partners what this product will look like. And it's fortunate that they did. Now no one cares about that. I bet no one ever asks Simplebet for a white label free-to-play product ever. They say, give us the odds feed. But it is funny to think about some of the things that you have to do, some of the things that don't scale when you're trying to get a business off the ground, especially something disruptive and transformative.
Hindsight is certainly 2020. That wraps up the first segment of the episode. So now we would like to welcome on Joey Levy and Tomash Devenishek.
And we're back. So welcome, Tomash. Welcome, Joey, to the Vested Interest podcast. Appreciate having you guys. Just a quick intro on each of you on my end. Tomash is the founder of Kero Sports, which is a player in the micro betting space. And Joey Levy, who many of you might know, is initially the founder of Simplebet, which is the subject of much of this conversation with their sale to DraftKings, and is now, of course, the founder and CEO of Betr in partnership with Jake Paul and the rest of his team over there. So, guys, welcome. Joey, I'm going to jump in with you right away. A little bit earlier, just recently, Lloyd was talking a bit about the early days and how, when you got going with Simplebet as the founder initially, it didn't gain market acceptance all that quickly. And tying that in, what was your thought process? What were your emotions? Kind of seeing that baby that you began with and built, and even though you're no longer a part of that company directly, seeing it come to fruition in the M&A and the sale to DraftKings, kind of summing up that whole journey and what your thought process was, thinking back to those early days that were more challenging all the way to now, the culmination of that exit. Just love to get your impressions and what was going through your mind at that time.
Yeah. I have a lot of thoughts about it that, I'm sure we're not going to be able to cover in the limited time we have now. But and I think I've sort of publicly spoken about this already, but I initially started Simplebet to, essentially do what we're doing at Betr, which is to be a direct consumer company that was focused on simplifying the sports betting user experience from like a UI UX perspective, which is why the name of the company actually is, or, I guess post M&A was Simplebet. And then shortly after PASPA was repealed and we realized that there was a real dearth of, product and technology that was built bespoke for the US market and US sports, that's when we started going down this rabbit hole of really seeing what the opportunities were and realizing that micro betting was a particularly exciting opportunity for US sports, given the cadence and composition of US sports are very stop and start, moment to moment. There's a lot of scoring and a lot of speculation over players and what they'll do next in the event. which is a dynamic that doesn't really exist as well for a sport like soccer that obviously dominated the global OSB industry. But that sort of insight was more intuition based, right? So when we realized that this was the direction we wanted to go into as a business and be a B2B supplier of micro betting and in-play focused products, we went into a lot of meetings with potential operator partners, and we're kind of laughed out of a lot of rooms because people were just kind of looking at the adoption of micro markets globally and seeing it be a sub 1% of handled product and not thinking that it would really be a big deal in the US market, just given how it was performing overseas. So, and then obviously like the thing that, they were all wrong about is that US sports are just very different in nature than soccer, and how the global marketplace sort of shook out from a content perspective. But that was just like an intuition based insight that we had, that there wasn't really any data to support our claims. And at the same time, you had a situation where building the technology to enable micro betting is very difficult, and it's expensive. You need to hire a really good engineering team across data engineering, data science, machine learning engineering. You need to be able to then, in addition to the probability focused approach, you need to have an engine that could create, suspend, reprice, and result markets, which requires a lot of bespoke software to be built around match state. And so it's like it's an unproven thing. At least it was unproven at the time, and it's an expensive thing. So we had to go out and raise a lot of capital. And then that fed into the criticism, because people are like, not only is this not going to work, but you're, raising a lot of money and you're lighting it on fire, and it's just going to be a disaster, right? And in the early days, it wasn't working, right? Like it took time for us to figure it out, and it took time for us to convince a set of operators to give us an opportunity to be successful. And it's come full circle with DraftKings, because they were the first big operator that really gave us a chance. Before DraftKings, there was actually a smaller operator, and they're not small, but they in the US they're small, which Intralot, which is based in Greece, they were previously powering the DC OSB app. And you could say whatever you want about that product, but they were actually the first ones that gave us a chance. And we were able to integrate our product with them, and we were at least able to then go to DraftKings and others and show that it worked. Like the pricing was accurate, and we were generating positive GGR margin. The automated market mechanics were working, and that was enough for DraftKings to then decide to give us an opportunity in prime time. And obviously kudos to Chris and Mark and Simon and AJ and the rest of the Simplebet team for doing a great job in prime time and really delivering for DraftKings. And that ended up leading to sort of a flood of additional business, with Caesars and ESPN Bet and Hard Rock and Bet365 and many of the other operators that we've come to know and respect. So yeah, I'll stop there because I know we're limited on time, but I try to keep sort of the journey as high level as possible. And then of course, speaking for myself, I'm incredibly fortunate and grateful to have been able to spin out Betr from Simplebet, and in many ways finish what I originally started, which was a user experience focused vision as a direct to consumer company.
That's awesome. I want to make sure we get a word in from Tomash here, but I do first have a follow up for you, Joey, and maybe Tomash could pick up on this one. You describe how back in 2018 you thought the future of micro betting handle would be a lot greater than the market expected, and you ended up being right. I sort of observed something happening again today. People have gotten on board with micro betting a bit, but I think you probably are one of the most bullish people, and I think probably myself, Benjie, and Tomash are right there with you, that thinks a lot of people still are underestimating, like maybe even by multiples or orders of magnitude, how big micro betting will get in the future. Maybe that's because the young generation who grew up with instant gratification still is aging into their purchasing power. Maybe it's because the bettors of the world still need to put the optimal UX wrapper around the underlying product. Maybe it's latency of video feeds. Those are some of my intuitions, but I would love if you and then maybe Tomash could share a bit about why do you continue to have such a strong intuition that micro betting handle and growth is going to continue to outperform what a lot of other analysts or stakeholders might expect?
Yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned a few of the reasons why there's a lot of upside to the future of micro betting and, some of the tailwinds, right? Like micro betting has already been generating billions of dollars of annual handle for US OSB, despite the fact that you still have, suboptimal incident feeds from a data perspective, and there's a lot of room for improvement there. And there's a lot of things about this story in terms of how some of the data companies have been dealing with the B2B guys that I've kind of publicly spoken about a little bit at conferences and whatnot, and like there's real problems there and real sort of a misalignment of incentives when it comes to like people say that they want product innovation and things that are good for the consumer, but then how some of the data companies have been acting has been a little bit misaligned with that perspective, right? So like you have real issues with the data companies that hopefully will be improved over time. Broadcast latency on the real-time streaming of games is something that needs to improve in a significant way. And I'd say that's probably the biggest opportunity, right? Because like if you go from, on some of these OTT platforms where you have anywhere from like 7 to 30 seconds, sometimes more of broadcast latency. And if you could shrink that to, a second or two, or maybe even less than a second, because there are technologies out there that could help get it to that place. If you're able to solve for that, then there's a world where micro betting actually could be just as popular, if not even more popular than parlays, right? Because that could become kind of second nature with respect to how a sports fan is consuming a game. They place their pre-match bets, but then they're watching the event and they're really sunk with the real-time sporting event in a way that just creates an amazing user experience. So those are just two of the potential opportunities. We'll be really interested to see what DraftKings does in terms of building upon the technology that they are acquiring from Simplebet. Obviously, DraftKings is, a large organization now with an incredibly capable and talented product and engineering team. And, I think that when a direct-to-consumer operator owns the technology, they could build bespoke user experiences around it in a way that maybe they weren't as compelled to do so when they knew that they were getting the same technology that a variety of other D2C brands were also getting. So there's a lot of opportunity. And, I think, and I posted a little bit about this, like there's this industry narrative right now that this is like a FanDuel, DraftKings, like market is settled and game, set, match. But I still think we're kind of like in the top of the second of this industry, and there's going to be a new wave of product innovation that happens here. And what happens with micro betting will be a big part of that, I think.
Cool. Tomash, what about you? Why do you think now where we stand? Certainly, we've all been happy to see micro betting handle grow. Why do you think, whatever your projections are for micro betting handle 5 years from now, why are those higher than maybe some of the projections of other industry analysts or folks commenting?
Well, I think I'll distill probably what Joey was saying, which is that the micro product is an ideal complement to a live game experience. If you're watching that game, micros complement that experience from a let me enjoy the game the most. It's not betting on something that's going to come to be true at the end of the game, right? Because there are far longer cycles of time between the time that you place the bet and when that bet resolves. So the micro product, I think, is the best complement. And we can see that, and Joey probably saw it as well, in the user numbers. You have users that will bet 40, 50, 60 times, 100 times even in a single baseball game. Well, you don't get that with other product forms. And even contrary to Joey's intuition, because we, in large part due to the great work that they did at Simplebet within the US market, we went international with our business because we were sort of locked out of the US, and soccer was a key product for us. And I've posted about some of our performance metrics during the Euros. So even in soccer, we see some of those numbers. And I think those numbers tell us that with time, a lot of people will graduate to those types of engagement metrics. But I think the other good underlying point is that the micro product isn't just another category that you fit into a tab that has 50 or 60 markets, and then people have to navigate to it. The integration itself and how people are being presented or merchandise that product is extremely important. And there's a big, big difference. And we see that as well because we power over 100 books globally, that books that simply put us in a category don't get as much of their share of handle during in play from the micro product than the ones that are presenting it in the right way, that are using some of our recommendation based algorithms that kind of pick out the best bet right now, et cetera. So I think it's the presentation and the underlying metrics that we're seeing from a smaller cluster of the users, which I think over time, all users will graduate.
A question for you, Tomash, kind of following up on that, but coming back specifically to you look at Simplebet and they came onto the marketplace and kind of had the first mover advantage and gobbled up a number of these US clients. And, now of course they're with the sale to DraftKings, but even prior to that, coming into this thing as kind of the second wave and not the first player with that first mover advantage, what advantages and or disadvantages did that present to you? What were you able to learn from the experiences that Joey's company paved? Joey alluded to it being very expensive and the amount of capital needed to kind of get this thing to market the first time around. But what are some of the advantages or things that you were able to, and within that, kind of looking at ways for you to differentiate so as not to have an identical product? And maybe you can comment within that whole sphere of questions that I just came with you with.
I mean, first of all, I want to say thank you to Joey and Chris, who have always been good friends and very forthcoming with information and kind of helping us answer some questions that they already answered, even though we were competitors. I think we had the first mover advantage internationally by kind of focusing on soccer and some of the international stuff, but certainly they paved a way for everybody to recognize this product category. Look, I think on the capital side, yes, it is expensive. Yes, it is difficult to build all of those things, which we have also built. But there are so many proxies that told us that we were correct, right? If you look at how people consume entertainment in general, it is all about short form, repeatable forms of dopamine. And so, look, I think Simplebet, again, they helped the entire industry. And so I congratulated you, Joey, on LinkedIn and said what I just said now. You guys helped everybody recognize the importance of micros, and we're going to continue holding the torch from here and cheer for you at Betr.
Tomash, if you could tell us just a bit briefly here, we've been talking a lot about micro betting. You guys have an incredible roster of like half the NFL, NBA, NHL teams where I believe if anyone is in their official team app during a game, making predictions, talking smack to other fans, they have you to thank for that. Could you just tell us a minute, where does that factor into your business? How does that relate to the micro betting? Do they feed one another? Are they complementary? Do you think of them more as distinct areas of the business?
They absolutely feed one another. And so Joey talked a little about the market automation, right? Figuring out the game state in real time. And so we started working with the teams when I founded the company 4 years ago. So today we're in the apps of the Chiefs, the Niners, the Bucks, a bunch of other NFL teams and NBA. And so, yes, we certainly look at, because we have this great focus and emphasis on not just serving a static list of markets that constantly get repriced and change the variables within them, but rather figuring out what is contextual right now. So if Jimmy Butler hasn't scored his last 3 shots, an algorithm will pick that out and say Jimmy has gone cold, he's 0 for 3, what will happen to his next shot? That's kind of one of the core competencies of ours, algorithmically, not at a human level. And so we use a lot of that data, that behavioral data, to figure out how do we serve the most contextual thing. And so it definitely paves a good innovation ground for us, because obviously you don't need to necessarily work out the the risk components of those propositions up front. And then we also work with a lot of broadcasters now as well. So for sure, there's a complementary innovation loop that happens between the free-to-play and the real money. And then obviously with real money, what you have to do, as Joey said as well, is you have to make sure that you're generating a good positive GGR percentage. And then that we have a whole other team that kind of focuses on that part.
Joey, you spoke a little earlier. Obviously, you're on to Betr now, and that's your focus. You spoke a little bit earlier about how there's growth within the micros because the micro betting opportunity hasn't been presented within existing sports books in an optimal manner. How critical is the micro component for what you're looking to do? You know, in the early days, I recall that it was kind of a big focus in terms of how your company was presented, whereas now you seem to have evolved into media and just an entire real money gaming experience appealing to the next generation, which may not be as micro specific. So I'd love to hear your comments on that. And the second component to that question is, you know, obviously you're a third-time entrepreneur here, the Simplebet experience and chapter behind you. What are two of the three biggest takeaways or learnings that you've had from that experience that make you a better entrepreneur and Betr a better company?
Yeah. There's a lot there. I guess on the first piece, you know, I and Betr remain very bullish on micro betting. I think for us, we just had to take a step back and think through how we're going to sequence execution to best position the company for success in both the near term and then ultimately the long term. And you know, we started with Betr Media, which, you know, we founded Betr in early 22. We launched Betr Media in August of 22. So just a little bit over 2 years ago now. And, you know, we wanted to start there first to begin developing a brand that has awareness and affinity and growing audience. And, you know, I think I could confidently say Betr Media is probably at this point the largest sports gaming focused media business in the United States right now, and certainly the fastest growing, and has a path to being one of the larger sports media properties in the US in general in pretty short order. So, you know, we started with the brand. We, on the gaming side, we were initially thinking that maybe we'll start with an OSB, like a micro betting focused OSB product. We quickly realized that that was not going to be a winning approach for us. We instead decided to prioritize Betr Picks, which is our fantasy sports product, to have broader geographic coverage with a product that, you know, we also have a lot of expertise in developing. As you know, Benjie, I actually got my start in fantasy sports in this industry before Simplebet. You know, we brought on, you know, guys like Scott Malewig, who actually, you know, pioneered fantasy pick'em with Monkey Knife Fight. And, you know, Alex Ursa with his background at FanDuel, knowing how to kind of, you know, piece this all together. And, you know, between the domain expertise in fantasy, the opportunity to really leverage the nationwide brand that we had built with Betr Media, with a product that was available in much of the country, with good unit economics and with capital that we were able to deploy across you know, paid performance marketing channels, we, you know, made a decision to focus on that first. And we hard launched Betr Picks actually just about a year ago, right? Last September, ahead of the last NFL season. And despite being pretty brand new here and you know, technically live with this product for less than a year, we are already a market leading fantasy sports operator, right? I think amongst the, you know, you basically have a big six between FanDuel, DraftKings, Underdog, Prize Pick, Sleeper, and Betr, and then there's a pretty big drop off after that. So pretty proud of being a market leading fantasy sports operator in less than a year. And then over time, we're going to, you know, continue to invest into an on-ramp into sportsbook and casino. And I would say amongst all the fantasy pick'em companies, so obviously FanDuel and DraftKings are in fantasy and they're market leaders in sportsbook. But if you look at the fantasy pick'em companies like Prize Picks, Underdog, Sleeper, and Betr, which are the big four in fantasy pick'em, you know, I'd say we're significantly furthest along and most advanced in sportsbook. We've, you know, soft launched our new sportsbook platform in Ohio and Virginia. We announced that last week. We have Indiana and Maryland on the way, where we already have a temporary sports wagering license and going through the process to go live there now. We also have announced market access in Pennsylvania, Colorado, and Maryland. Pennsylvania, Colorado, and Kentucky. So I think of all the fantasy pick'em guys, we're definitely the most advanced on sportsbook, and we're going to be investing significantly into sportsbook. I'd say already a significant portion of our product and engineering team is focused on sportsbook, and I think for us it's going to be more of a question over the next few years regarding how do we divvy up our paid marketing budget across fantasy, sportsbook, and then ultimately casino, because we still plan on launching Betr Casino in Pennsylvania, which would also make us the only fantasy pick'em operator that has an iGaming strategy. How do we divvy up those investments over the next few years due to a variety of different business considerations? And then I guess the last thing I'll share about this, and there's a lot more I could talk about, obviously, in terms of our plans going forward, but, we're going to be, we plan on launching, fantasy in Virginia soon, where we've, soft launched our new sportsbook. And that'll mark the first time, I think, in this industry's history that a single app experience has been provided for fantasy and sportsbook, right? Because even FanDuel and DraftKings have separate fantasy apps. DraftKings actually has two different fantasy apps, right? They have their legacy DFS app and they have their Pick Six app. And that they have their sportsbook and casino app. FanDuel, also has a similar dynamic, but the Betr app will be the first single app experience that has both fantasy and sportsbook, and then ultimately casino in one app, which really consolidates a lot of our user acquisition efforts, our brand development efforts, and also it's a unified KYC and onboarding process, which will really reduce friction when it comes to the cross-sell experience as well.
That's awesome. I think we might have lost Pierre here for a second, which is strange. So I'll maybe serve it up to Tomash just to close things up, and hopefully Pierre can come here and end the recording. Tomash, last few minutes here, just tell us a bit about your primary thoughts on what does the future of the sports fan experience look like? What's the most different thing 5 or 10 years from now that people who are sports fans will take for granted in their everyday experience, but that maybe is not part of everything today?
Well, I think number one is younger people will grow up to be sports better, right? So that's going to drive a lot of changes. And I think that probably to go right back to what Joey said at the beginning, the sportsbook experience is going to need to change in some ways. And most likely it's going to be the user experience of that sportsbook, because today it's just an ever-growing roster of things. And we see that now. We see those trends around not just personalization, but how do you condense that to a lighter user effort, right? I think the sportsbook today is a prosumer experience, which any of us that have used the prosumer product, it doesn't matter how it feels or looks, it just needs to do the job. And so if you're risk trading, that's what you expect. But if you are doing it from an entertainment standpoint, which I do think that audience that's coming up now is certainly expecting from everything, not just their sportsbook, things are going to change. And I do think that the micros, especially in the way that we've thought about the micro experience through a recommendation and personalization angle, will be a big component.
Appreciate that. And Joey, congrats on everything. I think we're all really excited to be users of your product, consumers of the content, see what happens from here. Tomash, to you as well. Obviously, everything is ripe for the picking for you guys right now. And we're both so honored and privileged to have had even the slightest of sort of a front row seat from the early days, and to see things to have come to fruition from here. So appreciate all your time today, guys, and looking forward to what's next from both of you.
Thank you for having us.
Appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Take it easy, everyone.
All right. Take care. Bye.